So in the next step, it will return true. In the next iteration, the 70, the second item from this list, will get passed to this function. So we'll execute all the steps one by one. So the filter function returned filter object, and we are typecasting that object into a list which contains all the items which is greater than 75. Hello and welcome back to another video. So in this video we are going to talk about the map, filter and reduce function which is provided by the Python, and we will understand how to use these functions, when to use it. So by the end of this video you will be very much familiar with the map, filter and reduce function. So map, filter and reduce function are paradigm of the functional programming languages, and they allow programmers to write a simpler code without necessary or bothering about the for loop and conditional statements. So map and filter comes with the built-in function Python modules, so we don't need to import any external packages to use map and filter functions. However, reduce function need to be imported because that is moved to a functool module, which we are going to talk about it. So now let's go and talk about map, filter and reduce one by one. So first we will talk about the map function. So the basic syntax of the map function is, so this is the basic syntax of the map function, right? So map function accept a function as argument and the list of iterables. So here the most important thing you should keep in mind, the asterisk sign. So we have already learned about args and keyword args in our previous videos. You should be very much familiar with this syntax. So in map function we provide the function and the list of iterables or iterators. So there are a couple of important points you should keep in mind. In Python 2.7, or you can say in Python 2, so the default return type for the map function was a list, but in Python 3 the map function will not return the list, rather it will return the map object. So now let's see a simple example of a map function, right? So suppose I have a list of friends here. So I have a list of friends which are in a small letter or a small case. I want to convert all these names in uppercase. So in traditional Python programming, how we do that? So first what we can do, we can define an empty list. So this is a very traditional way of doing the things, right? So if you have a list of names, if you want to convert all the names into uppercase, you can do something like this, right? So what we are doing, we have just created an empty list which will contain the result of all the names in uppercase. So we are looping through all the items from a list one by one, and we are appending all the names in uppercase. You can also see here, right? So in this diagram, so all the names are now converted to uppercase. If you go and run this code, you will see now we are getting the list of all the names in uppercase. So this is a traditional way of doing the things in Python. So now let's see how we can do the same thing using a map function. So I will just comment out this part, and now we will use a map function to accomplish the same task. So I'm creating a variable, a map, right? So remember, the first argument of this map function would be a function. The function which we were using is upper. So that upper function is a part of string. So here we will provide the function and the list of arguments. So we have a list of friends in, right? If we go and print the friends list, if we go and run this code, you will see we are getting a map object. So we are not getting a list. So we were talking about the Python 2 and Python 3, right? So in Python 2, the map function by default returns the result in a list format. But in Python 3, map function will not return a result in a list format. Rather, it will return the map objects. So this map object contains all the results within it. So if you want to print the result in a list format, you have to explicitly call the list function. So if we call the list here, and if we run the code again, you will see now we are getting the result in a list format. So it is not restricted to use a list. You can also use tuple to get the result in tuple format, or you can also use sets, right? If you run the code, you will get the results in set. There is one more thing. While calling this map function, you can directly do the casting over here, like list, like this. So if you go and run your code, you will now get your result in list format. So the important thing is you should keep in mind here we are passing the function, right? Remember, we are not calling a function. If we were calling the function, we have to use these brackets. So this is called a calling a function, but here we are just providing the function name and the list of parameters. So another important thing is this upper function accept only one argument. That's why we are only providing a single iterator, right? If you are using any function within a map function which accept more than one argument, in that case you have to provide more than one iterators. So we are going to see that as well. Don't worry about it. If the function you are passing requires 2, 3 or n number of arguments, then you need to provide or pass 2, 3 or n number of iterables. So now let's see with an example. I will go and comment out this code. I will also comment out this, right? So suppose you have a function called, right? So you have a function add which accept 2 parameters, and here I'm providing some doc string add function accepts 2 args, right? So this is the doc string which I have provided, and you just go and return a plus b. Alright, so what we have done here, so we have just defined an add function which will return the addition of these two variables, and here we are passing 2 iterators. So this is our first iterators and this is our second iterators, right? So keep in mind we are providing these 2 iterators because this add function expect 2 arguments. So if we quickly go and run this code, you will see the expected result, right? So here we are getting 6, 8, 10 and 12. How we are getting 6, 8, 10 and 12? Now let's see it. Okay, so here our pointer comes to add function. So here we have defined the add function. You can see inside the memory a function is get created and the reference is get assigned to this add variable. Now our pointer comes to this particular line where we are calling our map function, we are passing our add function and providing a list of iterators. So if we execute the next step, you will see this add function get called. So the first item from this iterable assigned to a variable A, and the first item from this iterable get assigned to variable B. So if we execute one more time, it's get evaluated and it will return the 6. Now the map function called the add function again with the value 2 and 6. These two get assigned to variable A, and the second item from this iterator 6 get assigned to B, and this function will return the addition of these two, which will become 8. The same step would be repeated by all the items from these iterators. So if we quickly go and run this, in third time we are passing 3 and 7, right? So 3 and 7, it will return 10, and the fourth iteration we are passing 4 and 8, which will return 12. So the map function will return the map object, right? And we are explicitly typecasting the map object into a list, right? So the new list will get created inside the memory. If we go and execute the line, you can see the result now pointing to the new list which is created with the result, right? I hope that is clear. If you have any doubts and question, you can ask your question in the comment section. I will try my level best to answer all of your question as soon as possible. Now let's go and see how we can use a lambda function within a map function. So for now what I will do, I will just comment out this code and we will implement the same functionality with the lambda function. Okay, so this is the implementation with the lambda function with inside the map function. So we have already learned about the lambda function in our previous videos. If you are not familiar with that lambda function basics, I will strongly recommend you to go and watch my previous video to get familiar with the lambda functions. The sequence would be the same. If you want to see, let's go and trace that code as well. So here we have defined our lambda function inside the map function, right? Now let's go and trace that code. So the first call, right? So lambda function get called with value 1 and 5, which is assigned to A and B, right? First value from this iterator get assigned to A, and the first value from this iterator get assigned to B, and it will return the addition of these two values, right? So we are returning 6. The next time the second lambda function get called with the value 2 and 6. So here you can see the second value is 2 and the second value of this iterator is 6, and it will return the addition of these two values, right? The same process will get called for all the elements, and at the end all the returned value from these functions stored inside the memory. I hope that makes sense and you are able to understand how we can use a lambda function inside the map. So one more important thing you should keep in mind, it's not a mandatory to provide a list as a iterator. Now let's go and talk about the filter. So the filter function in Python, as name suggests, filter out or extract each elements from the sequence or a iterator which we provide into a filter function, which returns the true. So we provide a function and the iterators. So the basic syntax of a filter is you use a filter function and the second argument would be iterator, and it will return all the values which applied to this function if this function will return true. I know it's a bit confusing. Let me just give you a quick example so you can understand it. We have a list of marks of each student, right? And we want to filter out all the marks which are more than 75. So the function which we use inside the filter should return true or false. If you are not using a function which use true and false, it will just return the iterator which we pass. So what do I mean by that? Let's go and see it. So I'm creating a function. Alright, so we have defined a simple function called isPassed, and we are expecting single parameter. If the marks which we will provide to this function, if that marks is greater than 75, it will return true, otherwise it will return false. So now let's understand. So here is our filter function. Inside this filter function, we are passing the function which we have defined. So this is our function and here is our iterator. So iterator contains the list of numbers. So one by one, all the elements from this iterator or a list will pass to this function, right? And this function will return, if that marks is greater than 75, it will return true, otherwise it will return false. So now let's go and iterate our code and see. Okay. So here is a list which will get created inside the memory, right? So which will contain all the marks. Here we are executing the filter method. So now let's see how it's get calculated and what it returns. So if we execute our first line, the first element from this iterator will get passed to this function, and this function will evaluate and return the result accordingly. So in the next step, it will return true. In the next iteration, the 70, the second item from this list, will get passed to this function. So we'll execute all the steps one by one. So the filter function returned filter object, and we are typecasting that object into a list which contains all the items which is greater than 75, right? I hope this is clear. Now let's go and see how we can use a lambda function with a filter, right? So we will implement the same functionality with the lambda function. So I will just comment out this code and implement our own lambda function. Right, so here we have defined our lambda function which accepts a single argument and it will return with true and false, right? So here you can also see that each time the lambda function get called and it returns the true and false value, right? And you can see now passed variable is now pointing to the list. All right, I hope that makes sense. So I will just quickly comment out this code. Now let's see another example. Find out all the words which are palindrome, right? So how we can do that using a filter function in Python. Okay, so here we got our list of a string which contains Python, free, madam, jelaj, and Java. These are the list of a string, and we need to find out all the words which are palindrome in this list. So here is a tuple, we can convert it to a list. All right. And for this task, we will use a lambda function with the filter, right? So now let's quickly go and implement our lambda function. So here we have defined a lambda function inside that filter function. So in lambda function, what we are expecting single word. So here we are just reversing that word and we are just comparing. So remember, in filter function we provide that function which returns the true or false, and here we are providing a list of iterators. If we go and print this and run this code, you will see now we are getting only two words which are palindrome. Right? So using this filter function, we can easily find out the palindrome string with the list of strings. So I hope you can see it. Okay. So now in this line, we have a list of strings filtering out all the items, right? So the first execution of the lambda function will accept the value Python, right? Because the first element from this list is Python. So this lambda function will evaluate and execute this expression and return true or false accordingly, right? So this lambda function will return false because the Python is not a palindrome word. In the second iteration of lambda function calling, we are passing a free, the second item from this list, to this lambda function argument. And this lambda function will evaluate and return. Third iteration, we are passing a madam. The lambda function returns true because this is palindrome word. Now you have a better understanding about the filter and map function and how we can use it. Now let's go and talk about the reduce function, right? So the basic syntax of the reduce function is reduce. We provide the function same as a map and filter, and we provide sequence or iterator with the default value, which is initial value. Sometimes people call this the default value, and it will return the values. Right? So this is a basic syntax of a reduce function. Reduce function is not a part of built-in modules. This is a part of func tool modules. So how we can import the reduce function from the module? We use from func tools import reduce. So let me just quickly give you one simple example that would be better to understand this concept. So suppose we have a list of numbers called So what we have done here, right? So first we have imported our reduce function, which is a part of our func tool modules, and we have defined a variable with a list of numbers, and here we have defined our custom sum function, and here we have called our reduce function with the function and the iterators which we are passing, or the sequence. All right. So here we are not passing any initial values. We are not using any initial values for reduce. To understand the reduce function in a better way, now just quickly go and trace that code one by one and see what is happening. So I will adjust the screen a little bit. Okay. So now first what we are doing, we are just importing the reduce function. So that function is imported, and now we have defined a list of numbers. So the list of number will get generated inside the memory, and now we have defined our function, custom sum function. So this function is now get created inside the memory. Now our execution point come to this reduce function. So in this reduce function, we are passing the function and the sequence or iterators. Now let's go and execute it, and in first iteration, this 3 and 4 get passed to this function as a first and second. So here you can see the first variable is now containing 3 and the second variable is now containing 4, and now it returns 7. Now execute one more time. So this return value will be a part of the next call, right? So the return, whatever the value would be returned by this function will get assigned to the first variable in next iteration, and the next value from this list will get assigned to the second variable. Now if we go and execute, this function returns 14. So the next time when function will call, the first argument would be 14 and the second argument would be 8. So if we go and execute, so here you can see this return value now get assigned to the first variable and the second variable now assigned with 8. So this is how the reduce function will work. If we go and execute, the return value is 31, right? If you go and run this code here, you will see now we are getting 31 as a result. You can just provide your initial value like this. For example, if I'm providing, so now result contains 41. So whatever the value you provide as a initial, as a first argument for the function, and whatever the result will return by this function will be the part of next function, and this procedure will follow for the other functions as well, right? So this is how we can use the initial with the reduce. I hope you have learned something new from this video. If you do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video and share this video with your friends. So that's it from this video. I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye bye and take care.